Welcome to the ninth grade experience. I'm your host, Chris Dutchko. As a teacher of freshmen and one of our freshman mentor committee faculty advisors, I spend a lot of my school day thinking about and helping students with the successful transition from middle school to the halls of Emmaus High School. The goal of this podcast is to give you the story of the ninth grade here at Emmaus High School through the people who live it daily, the students and staff. We will attempt to touch on the real issues and stories that ninth grade students face, ranging from academics to athletics, technical school, and just trying to find your way as one person in a community of approximately 2,700 students. We will also look to speak with some of the influential staff members who play a key part in a student's ninth grade year. It is the hope that future ninth grade students and their families can use the tips and insights provided here to begin making connections to their potential new school and learn more about the day-to-day lives of the students that they will one day become and realize from day one that ninth grade counts. You can learn more about this episode and all of the episodes of the ninth grade experience by following us on Twitter at EHSFMC or at Chris Stutchko, or following the hashtag EHS9counts, or our website, sites.google.com/eastpennsd.org/ninth grade experience. Before we jump into today's topic, let's thank our sponsor for this show, the East Penn Education Foundation. This podcast has been made possible through a $1,000 grant awarded to teachers like me each year who are attempting to do unique projects in the area of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. The foundation supports programs that put learning in motion by giving students the tools they need to think actively in a complex and changing world. You can follow them on Facebook at EPSD Education Foundation, on Twitter at EPSD EdFound, or on Instagram at EPSD Ed Foundation. Now on to the show. In the ever-evolving world of education, the traditional role of the guidance counselor has seen a dramatic shift. Gone are the days when the only time you would see your counselor would be when making decisions about your post-high school path, whether it would be college or career. Now, counselors play an important role in not only helping to shape a student's academic outlook, but assist them in dealing with issues related to their social and emotional well-being. In this episode, ninth grade counselors Mike McInerney and Demchak share the challenges that students are facing, both inside and outside the classroom, the impact of social media on their jobs and interactions with students, and when to come down and seek advice of a counselor. They also discuss why it's important to get involved in a club, activity, or sport, important events put on by the guidance department each year, and the best way on how to find the counseling suite. So it's time to take a deep breath, pull up a chair, and listen for some advice from Mr. McInerney and Mrs. Demchak. All right, welcome to this episode. We're here with Mr. McInerney and Mrs. Demchak, our two ninth grade counselors, and they're going to be here today to give you a little bit about what they do in the building, their roles and responsibilities, and kind of giving you some tips to encounter your ninth grade year and make it as good a year as possible. So thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So before we jump in, why don't you guys take a little bit, just introduce yourselves a little. You can say how long you've been here at the high school and any other information that you think might be important for everyone to know.
My name's Demchak. I have been a school counselor here at Emmaus High School for 20 years. Work with students with the last names A through K. Really enjoying being in the ninth grade academy. It was a definite change of pace for me, and a decision I'm very happy with.
And I'm Mike McInerney, the other ninth grade counselor. I work with the second part of the alphabet, letters L through Z. I've been working in counseling in some capacity for 20 years, and here at Emmaus, I'm starting my 13th year.
And Mrs. Demchak spoke about the establishment of our ninth grade academy. This is the third year. They've been the counselors for the first 3 years of our program so far, so they've gotten to have some really good experiences and learned coming up with the several ninth grade classes, so they've had a lot of different experiences that they're going to share throughout this episode. But as we always start off with, we like to get a perspective of what ninth grade was like for our guests. So take a step back here, think back to when you were in ninth grade and remember number, no years. You don't have to identify how old you are. But think about your ninth grade year and what that was like for you.
I could say for me personally, ninth grade was probably the most difficult transitional time for me. Maybe that's why I'm kind of akin to, being interested in this program. In ninth grade, I was involved in sports and activities, but just the whole transition to the high school, socially, emotionally, was challenging for me. So I kind of think that's where I make the personal connection to this program.
I would agree. My ninth grade experience was very different. I don't know if I want to use the word geographically, but just in appearances, because I went to a very small private high school. And one might think that maybe things would have been a little bit easier because of the size, but it wasn't always that way.
And about how far into your ninth grade years did you finally kind of feel like you were transitioning well into the school? We've talked to a lot of people before that said maybe it took them till about midway, or some even said that the light really didn't go on until they got out of ninth grade. Maybe they were able to take a step back and look at their ninth grade year. So was there like a kind of a time frame that you remember, like, oh yeah, I get this high school thing now?
I don't know if I can recall. Maybe halfway through, or maybe once I got into 10th grade, did I feel that I was more at home or at peace with being in high school as a student?
I would say for me, it was maybe after the first marking period, once I finally hit a routine and knew what was expected of me, and also what I could actually expect of myself.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of learning, a lot of self-discovery, kind of making, those connections for yourselves too, I think. And that's something that's going to come up several times here as we talk, I think, is like how we can get students to make those connections and understand that. So now we're going to fast forward to 2019 here and taking a look at maybe what you encountered in high school as a freshman and what our students that are starting this year, what do you see are the differences that they're going to encounter, or what are even some things do you think are the same that they're going to encounter that when you were ninth grade students that you think that they'll have to deal with?
I would definitely say there's a lot of similarities as far as what I experienced even being in that small high school. And those for me would be finding my place, both literally and figuratively, how to get around, how to, like I said, understand what my expectations were. And then kind of figuring out okay, what kind of student did I want to be, and what was kind of, the image that I was going to project, and what kind of person was I starting to become. I think now it's just so much more difficult because of social media. I didn't have that, X number of years ago. Do the math, I've been working here for 20 years. Technology just was nothing back then. We didn't even have cell phones. So that definitely poses a very, very big variable, I think, for today's ninth grader.
Mm-hmm. I would say similarities, thinking about then and today, developmentally. Students are going through so many changes, growth, hormones, emotional changes. Even personally, I think about a fellow student that I had issues with in 7th and 8th grade, and then by the time we got to 9th grade, I was 6-7 inches bigger than this. So, things definitely changed. Where it was just very, very different. So, people kind of coming into their own bodies and figuring out who they are as young adults. All those funny, awkward stages, and kind of to piggyback off of what you said, technology. Kids talk about FOMO and fear of missing out, and while technology is wonderful and it definitely aids in the educational process, I think it also creates unnecessary stress that we didn't have in our generation.
And both of you have been here for several years, and your third year in the program, and even the technology that kids have had in the last 3 years has changed a whole lot. How has that made your jobs as counselors to these students coming up? And first of all, they're trying to learn their way around high school, but now they're also navigating this world that, literally we can't see when they're in the building. It's on, on the internet. How has that made your jobs more challenging?
It's a great question. I know with the one-on-one devices, I think, even back up, talk about cell phone use. I think the high school got to the point where we recognize everyone has one, so maybe we're a little lax in terms of where students can access that technology. Now that we've gone one-on-one, I kind of feel like the understanding within the building is that students should rely on their phones less and less now that they have the Chromebook in their hand. But we still have kids using technology in appropriately. We have teachers trying to monitor what they're doing in class. Again, technology, there's so many benefits to it. However, there's definitely significant challenges.
Absolutely. I think it all ties into what you alluded to before, like that, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, and that immediate connection, or wanting that immediate response, or feeling like they don't know something that everyone else, kind of in their social group or their peer group knows. It definitely is a distractor, both in the personal growth area and then obviously in the educational area, because if you're constantly thinking about like what's happening on that social media platform, you're obviously not attending to what's happening in the moment in your class.
So we know that like is really impactful for students to understand what's going on, and that fear of missing out that we've talked a lot about. But aside from technology, are you noticing any other struggles or new challenges that students are facing as they're becoming ninth graders now? Obviously, social media and all those different things. But what outside of that, are you noticing anything that's kind of growing or becoming a bigger issue for our ninth grade students?
I would just say one word that tends to be used over and over again is anxiety. And we could say the kids are stressed just based on the amount of work that they have to do, or a family commitment, and again, technology. But I would just say over the last 5 words, a buzzword that counselors kind of hear more and more is kids talking about anxiety.
I would absolutely agree with that, 100%.
So when students, and we're going to talk about like your role in helping to support ninth graders, but if a student were to come to you and say like, hey, Mr. McInerney, or Mrs. Demchak, I'm having some issues with anxiety, are there strategies or tips or people within the building other than yourselves that you would direct them to? So like, what would, like if I were a student and I came up and told you guys that, what kinds of things might you suggest that I do?
Right. You want me to jump in? Or
I can jump in, and feel free to piggyback off of what I would say. I think it's important, first and foremost, to let the students know that anxiety is normal, and a dose or a certain amount of anxiety is necessary to kind of know that, you're there, you have a pulse, and you're definitely active, you're an active participant in your life. There should be things that cause you to feel a little nervous or make you, kind of question some things. And I think it's important to try to educate students about that, because anxiety is kind of thrown around now as often an excuse.
It's like a looser term now.
Yeah, like, I have anxiety, so I can't do this, or I shouldn't be expected to have to do that. So that's my first kind of line of defense, is to kind of educate the student to say, well, that's good, I'm glad, because if you didn't feel anxious, then I'd be a little bit concerned that you just didn't care. Past that, then you kind of have to look to identify, okay, what is, can we identify what is causing this anxiety? So we might look to their schedule. Are they overloaded? We might talk about, what's going on at home. Are there family situations or other things that are, factoring in the whole big picture? Or is it like an isolated incident? And then that would kind of dictate my approach. Okay, where would I go with helping to alleviate that anxiety, and what people or, programs or resources would I kind of tap into to do that?
Right. Yeah, I would agree that a lot of times I wouldn't say normalize, but absolutely, anxiety is a part of life, and usually in small doses, it dissipates, it moves on, and kids figure out how to cope. But as school counselors, we're not therapists, and a lot of what we do is solution focused. So we might try to identify triggers, talk about specific courses of action that students can do to try and alleviate that anxiety, come up with an action plan. If it's a little more severe and we need help, we do have communities and schools here. We also have, access to our school psychologist and also our SAT program. So if it's a long-standing issue or it significantly impacts their education, we tap into other resources, and ultimately, working through SAP, we do have an outside mental health liaison that can help families connect with outside resources.
Is there, and you might not have an answer to this exactly, but is there a group of students that you're seeing have more anxiety than in the past? Just to think like, I'm in 4 honors classes as a freshman and I'm suffering from anxiety, or hey, I'm here and I'm going to LCTI and I'm just trying to get through the day and I'm having anxiety. Just so students kind of get an understanding that maybe they're not alone. But is there a group that you're seeing maybe, or is it across the board?
I would say it's across the board.
Absolutely across the board. I don't think there's one particular group. For me, I think it has a lot to do with, there's a lot going on. Everything's kind of hitting almost like that quintessential perfect storm. You've got the developmental changes. You've got now the changes in the academic rigor. You have the changes that are coming with navigating through a whole new building and a whole new system of rules and expectations. So I think any person could hit, a point where anxiety comes into play. I would say we normally would see it at some bigger stress times, but that's not always the case.
Right. We have new cases of anxiety where students out of nowhere, based on whatever's going on in their life or in school, deal with anxiety, but we also work with the middle school counselors, and we also share information to make sure that we're well aware of rising ninth graders and their needs. A lot of times, if you dig back a little further, you can see that some students that are struggling with anxiety now have had a history of it.
And whether it's anxiety or any other issue, is there a time, when would you recommend that a student comes to see their counselor? Just to kind of give people an impression, so if I have a little bit of anxiety, should I go see the counselor? What is a good, not that every student is going to have to be able to follow the same strategy, but when is a good time to actually think hey, I might need to actually go to my school counselor?
They should come to us anytime they want to talk to us.
Absolutely.
I'm always a proponent of, sooner as opposed to later. But I feel the students that maybe are moving in the direction of having really solid coping skills or being able to kind of navigate their way through the different challenges, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's academic, are the ones that will come down and say hey, Mrs. Demchak, this is going on. I'm feeling like maybe I need to do something about this, or I heard that I might not be doing the best thing. Can you offer some insight? Can you give me some suggestions? Do you think I should do X or Y? I wish that students would come to us, right when they're kind of feeling a little, because we could probably head off a lot more of the bigger type issues if we knew things sooner, as opposed to having them wait.
So being a lot more proactive as opposed to reactive, where you've now failed a couple tests and now you're having this anxiety, and it's you're already so far down the road that you've already kind of created quite a situation for yourself. So being much more proactive than reactive.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback, any student that has that thought, wow, maybe I should go see the counselor, and they're comfortable with coming down, that's a win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if they're not comfortable with coming down, can you why do you think they might not be comfortable, and what can you kind of say to them that might ease that anxiety again about coming to see a school counselor?
Right. I think number one, for freshmen, a lot of them don't even know where to find us. So it's important to learn your building, to learn where we're at. Everybody receives a map, and the counseling office is noted on there. I don't know, during tours, should this be a focal point? That's another question. I don't know. What do you think?
The other thing I would say is now with the, technological advances that we've made, they have the Chromebooks. So what they can do, and what I am absolutely seeing them doing, is emailing us.
Good point.
And pointing out hey, I'd like to talk to you about a personal problem. Fine, come down, I'll make an appointment. Some students will go and they'll give me, the whole backstory, the whole paragraph of what's going on and all the players and all the factors. And that's fine too. It's whatever their level of comfort is. I feel like the email kind of gives that first kind of contact to be, okay, I can reach out, and it's almost anonymous per se. And then I hope at least when they come down and meet with us, they understand that we have an office and we can close a door, and things are, kept as confidential as we can keep them, in the vein, of course, of making sure there's no, safety or harm issues.
Yep.
But then also to be able to help them to say, hey, this is what I think is going to be the best course of action for you, and I need to involve person A or person B. And whenever we can, we will give them the choice.
That's a good point, and that's what I think I was thinking about email. And for this generation, email tends to be antiquated. If it's not an app or texting, not that we're there or need to be there, but encouraging kids to email us. Sometimes, a lot of times, for students who are very shy and they have issues with teachers, I know in some meetings we recommend that if you feel like you can't approach the teacher directly, send them an email, make a request that they pull you aside. So absolutely, the more we can get kids on email or Naviance, which there's also a contact your counselor link in there. It's a great first step, and then we can call them down.
So since you brought up Naviance, I know the day we're recording this is actually the night where you're taking some time out to meet with parents about Naviance. So can you give a little bit, maybe for our parents that aren't going to be there tonight and may have a chance to listen to this, what is Naviance, and can you just walk a little bit through that? I know the students have been getting in their English classes so far this year a little bit of instruction on Naviance, but when you hear that, people will hear that word and they have no idea what it is. But what is Naviance here at Emmaus?
So it is our web-based kind of career and college readiness program. It's comprehensive in nature. One of the best features about it is that it will take students from ninth grade kind of self-discovery, which is what we're doing right now in the classroom settings. We have our students doing a learning styles inventory to help our ninth graders who maybe need some polish on their study skills to select appropriate study strategies for their particular learning style. And then for some of our ninth graders who, are employing study strategies already, to give them maybe some more tips and techniques for ways that they can kind of maximize their potential. So we start them with that in ninth grade, September, and we use the program all the way through senior year to when they are applying to colleges, technical schools, trade schools, and everything in between. So, what do I think I want to do with my life after high school? Do I see college in my future? Do I think I'm going to be more of, a high school to work kind of person? It's great.
And it's interesting, we all sit in meetings with students that are coming up as ninth graders, and already we're talking to them about what they're going to do after they're, done here at Emmaus High School. So it's really interesting that we already have a lot of things that we're working with students on to be able to get them to kind of look ahead and look forward.
And I do tell them about that when we have the classroom meetings, because
It sounds strange that we're already talking about graduation. You just got here.
It's the third week of school and we're already, planning, but that's the most important thing, and that's one of the kind of themes we try to emphasize with them, is that planning is important, and you will have a better outcome than if you approach something, haphazardly.
And for the parents that can't be there, and the students obviously can access it through their own accounts, but do parents have a way of accessing Naviance as well too, or do they have to go in through their students' access?
Parents receive their own account, so tonight after the presentation, parents can come up with an ID and get their login information. Otherwise, I believe a mailing goes home, and then they'll be able to, they'll have their own account. They can actually look at all the assessments and results from their student. They can also suggest colleges for their student as well. But ultimately, the full read-write access belongs to the kid, because we're trying to develop that ownership piece of, planning for your future.
Awesome. And then we shared a lot of like mini tips here sprinkled throughout about, when you're looking at those the inventories online and things like that. But do you have anything big takeaways for students and parents as they're now beginning? We're almost a month through the freshman year, but what are some just overall tips or strategies that you can kind of give to them to increase their ninth grade year and the experience for their ninth grade year?
We always say, try to connect with the high school, get involved. There's so much to do here. Over 20 PIAA sports, upwards of 50 clubs and activities, and the more students feel connected, this place doesn't feel quite as big, and really trying to make high school memorable and an important piece of their life.
I would definitely say my big takeaway would be to, try and form and cultivate key relationships. So whether that be with, a teacher or a coach or your counselor, your assistant principal, some adult in the building, formulate some type of, positive relationship so you have that go-to person should you ever need them. And then, of course, there's those relationships that you think about as, your high school friendships. And developmentally, as you had mentioned before, this is really a time where You might see some changes in those relationships, the ones that you had in middle school, and these may be different than the ones, you even have in college. And so thinking about what's important in a friendship, and understanding that, it's okay to kind of start making some of those decisions and kind of moving yourself toward more positive ones if you need to do that.
And as the year goes on, what are some other events that the guidance department will hold for maybe not just for ninth graders, but for all students? I know we have our popular college fair. We have some other things that are coming up pretty recently too. And the time has passed for the first Naviance thing. But what are some other things that parents or students can be on the lookout for to learn more from the guidance department?
Well, just number one, tonight, besides our ninth grade Naviance, we also have a 12th grade Naviance night going simultaneously. So that one's more directed towards, okay, how do I assist my senior in taking that next step, or how do seniors request transcripts and teacher recommendations and complete post-secondary reports for colleges. And then right after that is a financial aid seminar. So even tonight we have 3 events going on.
Right. In November we will have also a night for parents grades like 8 to 11, where they can kind of come and just learn about different topics. So if you're starting to think about, that should my son or daughter be looking toward a technical school or a trade school? Should we be thinking about college? We're going to have something like that. We have had numerous events, and each year kind of, varies as to what we will actually host. But there's always someone who you can kind of reach out to ask your questions. So that would kind of be what I would say is use that resource, contact us here in the office, and if there is something that we know that's happening, we are advertising it. Tonight there will be a handout, and then on the back of that we will have some of the options for parents and students to stay connected and to stay informed, and we are certainly able to give them kind of access to all the different things.
So there's lots of different ways parents and students can find out on the web. I know on Twitter, I think it's at EHS counselors are pretty active. And then the last thing that I'm going to ask you to do, in your best Hornet ambassadors, we talked about being able to find the counseling office. So can you give your best directional advice to finding the counseling office? So where are you located?
In the math wing?
In the math wing. If you know where Mr. Anoni's office is, we are directly across from that. I say that's probably the best way, and that's the advice that I always try to give students, is not necessarily trying to figure out where every room might be, but if you can kind of know like your anchor spots, then you're in good shape. So we're upstairs from the main office, and we're below the multimedia room.
All right. So thanks to Mr. McInerney and Mrs. Demchak for taking some time out here. If you need to access them, they're here at the school. And thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.